Emily Parker's heart hammered in rhythm with the hum of the engines beneath her fingertips. The early afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the desert runway, turning it into a ribbon of gold that shimmered with heat. She was 18, a student pilot at the small airfield outside Tucson, Arizona, and today was supposed to be a routine solo flight. A simple circuit, takeoff, a few maneuvers, and a landing. Routine, nothing more. Yet her stomach churned, and her palms were slick inside her gloves, betraying the calm smile she forced onto her face. She adjusted the headset and caught her reflection in the cockpit canopy. The girl staring back seemed younger than she felt. Nerves flickered in her eyes, but behind them determination glimmered. She had dreamed of this moment for years, earning her wings, feeling the hum of the engine, the lift of air beneath her small plane. Today, she was supposed to feel free. Today, she was supposed to feel confident. The instructor, Mr. Carter, had checked the plane before she climbed in, every gauge, every bolt, every line. He patted her shoulder, a grin beneath his salt-and-pepper mustache. "Ready, kid?" "Absolutely," she lied, forcing her fingers to relax. The engines roared as she taxied down the runway, the vibration thrumming through her seat and into her bones. The desert stretched endlessly on either side, dotted with cacti and low scrub, as though the world itself held its breath. Emily pushed the throttle forward, felt the plane surge, and lifted off. The wheels left the tarmac, and for a moment exhilaration swept through her, a bubble of pure triumph. She was flying. She was free. Then the sound came. A metallic shriek, sharp and unnatural, tearing through the otherwise smooth drone of the engine. Her stomach dropped. The plane lurched slightly under her hands, a tremor that wasn't turbulence. She blinked, gripping the yoke tighter, her knuckles whitening. "Hello," she called into the radio, voice steadier than her shaking hands. "Tower, something's wrong." The controller's voice came back, professional, calm. But the pause before he spoke again told her everything. "Emily Parker," he said slowly, "we're seeing a problem. Your left landing gear is gone. It's not deployed. I repeat, left gear is missing." Her mind blanked. Gone, gone, how can it just gone? She felt a jolt of fear racing up her spine, cold and hot all at once. The instructor wasn't on board today. This was her solo. Every emergency drill, every lecture, every simulation she had endured flashed across her mind. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't practice. This is real. The desert stretched beneath her in silent indifference. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Sweat prickled along her temples. "Okay," she whispered to herself, "okay, I can handle this. I can handle this." The tower guided her to circle over the airport while emergency crews scrambled. She followed their directions, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted flaps and speed, her eyes darting between the altimeter, the artificial horizon, and the broken wheel visible through the fuselage window. The wind buffeted the plane, every jolt reminding her of how fragile metal could be. Sparks of panic flared in her chest, but she pushed them down, replaced them with focus. Emily remembered her father's words from childhood. "Flying is freedom, Em, but freedom is only real if you respect the sky. Respect it and it'll respect you back." She gritted her teeth, repeating it like a mantra. Freedom didn't feel like freedom today. Freedom felt like a choice, an impossible one. The sun dipped lower, painting the desert gold to burnt copper. Fire trucks and ambulances lined the runway like guardians, ready for disaster. Through the headset, calm but urgent voices relayed instructions. "Circle, prepare, hold altitude, check gauges, don't panic. Don't panic." She repeated it again, tasting the words like medicine. Her fingers tightened on the yoke, each movement precise, instinctive. She replayed the emergency drills in her mind. Approach the runway with power, keep the plane level, touch down on the good wheel first, manage the forces, slide safely. It all made sense theoretically. The real world, however, refused to follow the logic of simulations. Emily glanced down at the asphalt far below. People had gathered along the fences, holding phones, cameras, their faces frozen between hope and fear. They were waiting for her to fail or survive, but mostly, she thought, they were hopping. She could feel their collective anxiety as tangibly as the vibration of the engine. Her breathing was deliberate now, measured. She let the hum of the engine, the wind against the fuselage, the slight tremor of the plane become her rhythm. Focus. You know this. You've trained for this. You can do it. She circled again, keeping altitude, practicing approaches in the sky. Every pass brought her closer to the moment she would have to decide, to commit to a landing, to fight gravity, and trust that training could overcome fear. Each circuit tightened the knot in her stomach. Failure wasn't an option, not for her, not for the thousands watching silently, not for the little girl who had dreamed of flying. The instructor's face popped up in her memory, the reassuring nods, the calm corrections, the sense that someone believed in her. He wasn't here. He trusted her to act, and suddenly the weight of responsibility felt heavier than the plane itself. She swallowed, feeling it lodge in her throat. And then it happened. A gust of wind caught the plane as she adjusted her trajectory. The small aircraft wobbled, leaning slightly to the left where the gear had failed. Her stomach lurched. For a brief heartbeat, the world tilted. Sparks of fear ignited inside her chest. She could imagine the plane scraping, the metal groaning, the headlines screaming her name across news feeds. "Not today," she whispered, jaw tight. "Not today." The tower's voice cut through the fear, steady, guiding. "Emily, prepare for a test pass over the runway. Fire crews are standing by. You're ready. Trust your instincts." Her heart skipped, a sudden jolt of adrenaline racing through her veins. A test pass. That meant committing for real to touching down with one side gone. Every drill she had learned, every mental rehearsal, every ounce of courage would be tested. Her fingers gripped the yoke, knuckles white. The desert stretched endlessly below, indifferent, while the runway beckoned, bright and final. Emily Parker, 18 years old, solo pilot, student of the sky, took a deep breath, swallowed the fear, and began her descent toward the runway. Sparks of terror and determination danced in her chest. The sun reflected off the fuselage, glinting like the edge of a knife. She was about to learn if training could truly triumph over panic, if courage could outweigh fear, if a girl alone in the sky could control a metal bird with a broken wheel. And the desert held its breath. Emily Parker's fingers shook as she guided the small Cessna through the sky, circling above the airfield. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the desert in streaks of orange and crimson, but the beauty of the moment did nothing to calm her racing heart. Every time she glanced down, the runway seemed impossibly small, the fire trucks mere dots ready to erupt into action. The absence of her instructor gnawed at her. He had been in countless emergencies, and now, for the first time, she was entirely on her own. "Emily, do you copy?" The tower's voice crackled through the headset, calm yet tight. "We're seeing debris on the runway. Left gear is completely missing. We need you to stay stable. Emergency crews are ready." She nodded even though he couldn't see her. "Copy, tower. I'm ready." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The truth was, her stomach had lodged itself somewhere in her throat, a cold weight of panic she couldn't shake. She adjusted the throttle, felt the engine's vibration pulse through the yoke, and repeated her breathing exercise from training. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She tried to focus on what she knew, not what might happen if the plane tipped, or if the metal beneath her feet fractured, or if she simply wasn't fast enough to recover. Emily had trained for emergencies, yes, but every drill she had done was controlled. Every simulation had a safety net. Today, there was no net. Today, every decision would be final. The runway stretched below her, flanked by fire trucks, ambulances, and flashing lights that reminded her of a city in chaos. Families and spectators lined the fences, their faces frozen in silent tension. She could see them, their eyes reflecting hope and fear, their phones pointed skyward, filming or ready to capture a moment that could go horribly wrong. "Do not let them see me fail," she thought. "Do not let me fail myself." She ran through the emergency checklist in her mind, step by step. Flap set, speed controlled, approach angle correct, airspeed monitored, yoke steady, focus. You know this. The tower instructed her to perform a test pass first, a low flyover to assess the plane's balance and behavior with one side compromised. Emily's stomach twisted at the thought, but she obeyed. Carefully, she descended, the runway growing beneath her like a thin ribbon leading her into uncertainty. She had to trust her training, trust her instincts, and trust the metal and engine beneath her that seemed to tremble with every gust of wind. The first pass was tense. The good wheel touched down, but the broken side dragged slightly, sparks erupting as metal kissed asphalt. Her hands shook violently. She gunned the throttle just enough to lift off again, climbing into the sky. Below, the fire crews exhaled in relief. "She's got this," one whispered. Emily's mind raced. The pass had gone better than she feared, but the plane's reaction reminded her how thin the margin was. One miscalculation, one gust, one distracted second, and disaster would strike. "I can do this," she repeated. "I will do this." She circled again, the desert glowing in the late afternoon sun, and tried to calm herself. Every gust of wind reminded her of the fragile metal frame beneath her hands. Every shadow from the setting sun made the runway seem smaller. She visualized the landing repeatedly. Touch down on the good wheel, maintain balance, manage momentum, slow gradually, slide if needed. Her heart pounded as adrenaline surged, the kind that made her tremble but also sharpened every sense. Her fingers tightened on the yoke. She focused on her instruments, the horizon, the runway. The wind buffeted the plane, trying to unbalance it. Emily felt it lean slightly to the left, the side where the wheel had failed. She corrected, each movement precise, each correction critical. Sparks of panic flared, but she pushed them down. She had trained for this. She had rehearsed it. She could do this. "Emily, altitude check," the tower said, cutting through the static. "Hold your pattern. We're preparing the runway for your landing." She responded, steady, altitude stable, pattern holding. Her voice betrayed none of the terror twisting in her chest. As she circled, she realized the airfield staff were preparing a path lined with foam just in case. The sight was sobering. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't classroom practice. This was real. She remembered her father's words about respecting the sky. Today, she respected it more than ever. A slight gust shook the plane as she made another approach. Her stomach lurched, and for a brief heartbeat, she imagined everything crashing. The plane spinning, flames, twisted metal, headlines screaming her name across the nation. She forced the thought away. Not now, not today. She could see the runway clearly now, stretching beneath her like a golden ribbon. The foam glistened in the sunlight, the fire trucks positioned at precise intervals. The test pass was over. Now came the real thing, the landing. Her pulse raced faster than the engine's vibration. She had trained for this moment, yet every instinct screamed that it was impossible. Emily took a deep breath. She had survived the first pass. She had control. She could feel it beneath her hands. Her palms still slick with sweat, she adjusted her speed, lowered the plane slightly, and prepared herself. She had to commit fully. Hesitation could be fatal. The radio crackled. "Emily, you are cleared for final approach. Keep steady, we're ready for you." The final approach felt like eternity. The runway stretched below, the desert stretching beyond it in endless gold and crimson. Her stomach twisted with fear, but her hands were steady. She visualized the plane touching down, imagined herself gliding safely to a stop. The good wheel would hit first. She had to trust it. She descended carefully, every adjustment precise. The wind teased the plane, trying to tilt it. She fought, muscles burning, jaw clenched. Sparks flew as the plane's wings scraped lightly against the runway on the side without a wheel. She kept it level, heart hammering in her ears. Then suddenly she felt it. The plane jerked violently. The broken side caught the asphalt, dragging sparks along the runway. The force threw her forward in the seat, panic clawing at her chest. Emily instinctively increased throttle just enough to lift the plane slightly, preventing a crash. The runway streaked below, and she fought to regain control, every movement deliberate, every decision life or death. "Stay with me," she whispered, gripping the yoke like her life depended on it, because it did. Fire crews shouted, sirens blaring, but she didn't hear them. The plane's engine roared, wind whistled through the cockpit, and the horizon seemed impossibly far. Seconds stretched into eternities. She had one chance to land this aircraft safely, one chance to prove herself, one chance to survive. And then, almost as suddenly as the jerk had come, she stabilized the plane. Sparks flew, but the aircraft was under her control again. Her heart pounded in her chest, every nerve alive with fear and adrenaline. Emily Parker, 18 years old, student pilot, alone in the sky, had survived the first test of fate. The tower's voice came through again, steady now with relief. "Emily, you've got this. Approach again when ready. You're in control." Emily nodded, though the headset hid it. Her hand still trembled slightly, but determination had replaced panic. She circled once more, fuel burning, muscles aching, the desert glowing around her like a theater of tension and possibility. She had survived the first real test, but the true challenge awaited, the landing that could not fail. The runway, the fire crews, the spectators, everything depended on her. And somewhere in the hum of the engine, she felt a quiet promise. She could do this. She had to do this. The sun dipped lower, the air cooled, shadows lengthened. The runway awaited like a final stage. Emily Parker, the 18-year-old student pilot, took a deep breath, gritted her teeth, and prepared to commit to what would either become a story of triumph or tragedy. And in that moment, the desert held its breath again. Emily Parker circled above the airfield again, the late afternoon sun now brushing the desert with deep orange and crimson streaks. The wind picked up, rustling the cacti below like an impatient audience. Her fingers clutched the yoke, muscles tight, sweat slicking her palms. She was exhausted physically and mentally, but there was no room for weakness. Not here, not now. Every decision, every subtle adjustment, every microsecond mattered. One misstep, one misjudged gust of wind, and the small Cessna could flip, spin, or break apart. The fire trucks and medics below seemed impossibly small, almost toy-like from her vantage, but Emily knew they represented a lifeline, a thread between survival and catastrophe. She tried to steady her breathing, each inhale deliberate, each exhale measured. Focus. You know this. You've trained for this. Her mind raced back to her father's words. "Emily, fear is your teacher. Respect it, but never let it control you." She had respected fear plenty today. She had respected it, observed it, but now she had to act beyond it. She could no longer think of herself as a student. She had to be a pilot. "Emily, status check." The tower's calm voice cut through static. "You're on final approach prep. Fuel is stable, speed is fine. You're ready when you are." Emily nodded, though they couldn't see her. Her heart thrummed in her chest like a drum. She forced herself to visualize the landing again. Good wheel touches down first, plane balanced, glide controlled, minimal sparks, avoid jerks, steady momentum. She ran through the checklist once more in her head: flaps, throttle, trim, approach angle. Her mind was a machine of precision, driven by adrenaline. The plane swayed slightly as she adjusted for wind. She gritted her teeth, correcting with small, precise movements. The desert below seemed impossibly far, yet the runway glimmered in the distance like a beacon. She was ready, or at least she told herself she was. Emily descended lower, every second stretching into an eternity. The runway approached, glowing under the fading sunlight, a thin strip that could decide everything. Sparks of fear erupted inside her chest, clawing at her resolve, but she forced them down. She could do this. She had to do this. The first touch of the good wheel on asphalt sent a shock through the small plane. The left side, missing gear, dragged slightly, metal scraping with a grinding scream. Emily's stomach lurched. Her training kicked in immediately. She eased back the throttle, adjusted the yoke, holding the plane level. Sparks erupted as the fuselage kissed the runway. Below, the emergency crews tensed, foam lines glinting under the sun, ready to leap into action. The plane lurched violently, the left wing dipping dangerously. Emily's heart hammered, but she refused to panic. She gently raised throttle, lifting the wing just enough to regain balance. the tires sliding over the asphalt. The sensation was terrifying, as if gravity itself were conspiring against her. "You can do this. You will do this." She focused, blocking out the voices, the flashing cameras, the spectators. The only reality was the plane, the runway, her hands, her instincts. Her mind ran faster than the engine. Adjust, correct, glide, throttle, hold, steady. Every movement mattered. Every second mattered. Every breath mattered. "Emily, you're holding well," the tower said. "Keep it steady, approach now. You can do this." Her stomach dropped as she committed to the landing. She knew she couldn't hesitate. Hesitation could be fatal. Slowly, inch by inch, she descended, feeling every vibration, every tremor, every spark. Her palms burned against the yoke. Sweat stung her eyes. She could taste the metallic tang of adrenaline. The runway approached faster now. She cut power slightly, letting gravity do its work while still maintaining control. Sparks erupted more fiercely as the missing landing gear side dragged along asphalt, leaving a trail of smoke and fire. Emily fought to keep the plane straight, muscles screaming, heart pounding like a jackhammer. And then it happened. The plane tilted violently to the left, dragging the wing hard along the ground. Emily's stomach lurched, and for a split second she imagined the fuselage flipping, fire engulfing everything, headlines flashing across news screens. Not today, not now. She fought instinctively, increasing throttle just enough to lift the wing slightly, steadying the plane. The runway blurred beneath her, orange and crimson streaks merging into a single line of salvation. Below, firefighters tensed, medics braced, cameras rolled. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, hands locked on the yoke. Every muscle screamed, but she forced herself to ignore it. Every micro-adjustment mattered. Every second mattered. Every spark mattered. She remembered her instructor's lessons, the countless hours of drills, the warnings about emergency landings. All that training had led to this exact moment. She could feel it in her bones, in her hands, in her pulse. She had to survive. She had to land. She had to prove herself. The plane scraped along the runway, sparks flying, metal screaming against asphalt. Emily held her breath, corrected instinctively, and slowly, agonizingly, she brought the aircraft to a glide. Every inch was a battle. Every second stretched into eternity. And then, just as she thought the plane might tip, slide, or break apart, it steadied. Her chest heaved, every nerve alive, every muscle trembling, but she was still in control. The runway stretched before her, foam lines and fire crews waiting. She had survived the first violent drag, but the landing was not complete. She had to bring the plane to a stop. She had to survive this final stretch. The wheels, well, the single wheel rolled along the asphalt. Sparks erupted from the dragging wing. Her hands shook, but she tightened her grip, controlling speed with precise adjustments. The engine roared in protest, wind buffeted the fuselage, and the desert stretched endlessly around her. Her mind raced. Slow, steady, glide, don't panic, don't tilt, don't skid. Her body screamed with exertion, adrenaline surging like fire through her veins. She could hear the fire crews shouting, sirens blaring, but it felt distant, as if she were in a bubble of tension and fear. Only the plane and her hands existed. Only survival existed. A slight gust of wind rocked the aircraft. Emily corrected instantly, every movement precise. Sparks flew, metal screeched, but the plane remained on course. She could see the end of the runway approaching, bright lights glowing, foam lines ready to catch her if she slipped. She adjusted speed, eased back the throttle, keeping momentum under control. And then, just as her heart threatened to explode from fear and exertion, the plane finally began to slow. The good wheel held, the dragging wing burned along asphalt, sparks showering into the fading light. Emily fought every urge to panic, keeping the plane steady, guiding it like a tightrope walker holding balance against impossible odds. The runway lights stretched closer, brighter. She could feel the metal beneath her vibrating with every jolt, every drag, every spark. The plane groaned, protesting, but obeyed. Inch by inch, meter by meter, Emily brought it under control. Finally, just as her body began to falter under sheer tension, the plane came to a stop almost. Sparks still flew from the damaged wing and the fuselage shuddered, but it remained upright. Emily exhaled, a trembling, shuddering breath. She had survived the first landing attempt. Below, the fire crews and medics let out a collective sigh of relief. Cameras recorded, spectators clapped, whispered, prayed. Emily's legs shook violently, but she held onto the yoke, taking a moment to steady herself. One crisis had passed, but she knew the plane wasn't done testing her. She would have to glide back, circle, and attempt the final, complete landing, and hope the aircraft held together long enough. Her heart pounded. Sweat drenched her gloves. Every nerve screamed. But Emily Parker, 18-year-old student pilot, alone in the sky, had survived her first brush with disaster. She could still fail, she knew. The plane could still betray her. But for the first time, she believed she could overcome it. She believed she could survive. Runway waited. The desert held its breath, and Emily Parker prepared to face the final, decisive moment, the landing that would decide everything. The runway stretched ahead like a glowing ribbon of possibility and peril, fire trucks lining each side, foam and emergency personnel ready for the inevitable. Emily Parker's heart pounded in her chest, a rapid drumbeat that echoed the vibrations of the plane beneath her. She adjusted the throttle, eased the plane lower, eyes locked on the distant runway lights. Every muscle in her body screamed with tension. Every fiber of her being was focused on keeping the aircraft alive. The desert air felt electric, as if holding its breath along with her. She could see the crowd behind the safety fences, phones raised, capturing the moment, their faces a mixture of awe and anxiety. Her stomach twisted. She couldn't think about them, couldn't let them into her cockpit. All that mattered now was the plane, the runway, and the split-second decisions that would decide survival. Emily had rehearsed this in her mind countless times, but the reality was infinitely harsher. The left landing gear was gone, a gaping absence that turned every movement into a calculated risk. She could feel the slight wobble in the fuselage, the uneven drag, the subtle pull to one side. The aircraft was alive but fragile. One wrong move, one misjudged angle, one gust of wind, and it would betray her. She descended steadily, flaps extended, airspeed controlled. Sparks danced beneath the broken side as metal kissed asphalt, each one a tiny warning of the danger she navigated. Her hands ached from gripping the yoke, sweat streaming down her face. She felt as if every nerve in her body were vibrating in unison with the trembling fuselage. Fear gnawed at her, a constant companion, but she focused it, turned it into heightened awareness. Below, the emergency crews tensed, foam lines glinting in the sunlight, ready to contain disaster. Their preparedness was reassuring, yet it reminded her of what failure could bring. She had one chance to get this right, one chance to bring the plane to a stop without catastrophe. She forced herself to visualize each moment. Good wheel first, balance, slide, gradual deceleration. The plan was clear. Execution would be everything. The first contact came sharply, the good wheel touching down with a solid, controlled thud. Relief flared briefly, only to be replaced immediately by a jolt as the broken side scraped along the asphalt. Sparks erupted, the screeching of metal against tarmac filling the cockpit. Emily's stomach lurched violently, but she refused to panic. Instinct took over. She increased throttle slightly, lifting the wing just enough to regain balance, correcting minute tilts with small, precise movements. Her breathing was measured but shallow, each inhale deliberate, each exhale tight. The runway approached faster now, the lights blurring slightly as adrenaline surged through her veins. Sparks flew continuously from the dragging wing, the fuselage trembling with every scrape. The plane wobbled. Her stomach churned. She felt as if she were suspended between life and catastrophe. She adjusted the throttle again, micro-corrections in perfect rhythm, muscles straining against the yoke. Her hands burned, but she didn't let go. She could feel the aircraft fighting gravity, metal grinding, sparks flying like miniature fireworks. Every second stretched, every inch of runway elongated. Emily's mind was razor-sharp, aware of everything, airspeed, altitude, wind, alignment, friction, heat, vibration, every variable calculated instinctively. Below, the emergency crews held their breath. Cameras recorded, spectators whispered prayers, parents gripped each other, hoping she would survive. Emily had no time for them. Her life was a singular focus: guide the aircraft, survive the drag, prevent the tilt, endure the chaos. She ran every procedure through her mind, every maneuver drilled into muscle memory, every emergency lesson embedded in reflex. The plane lurched again, a violent tilt toward the missing wheel. Sparks showered beneath the left wing, scraping asphalt furiously. Emily adjusted the yoke, eased back the throttle, then nudged it forward just enough to keep the wing from collapsing. The fuselage groaned, shuddering with each drag. Sweat stung her eyes. Muscles screamed. Her mind raced 100 miles an hour, calculating every tilt, every force, every microsecond. The runway seemed endless now, stretching before her like a battlefield. She felt as though gravity and metal were testing her, challenging her, daring her to fail. But Emily Parker was 18, trained, instinctive, and unwilling to surrender. Her father's words echoed. "Fear is a teacher. Respect it, but don't let it control you." She respected it. She was controlling it. The plane slid along, sparks flying, the metal protesting every inch. Her palms were raw, her forearms trembling from the tension. She had one goal: keep the plane upright, glide safely, survive. She focused on balance, throttle, and tiny adjustments, each movement a thread holding life together. The left wing scraped relentlessly, but she refused to let it tip. She refused to let it spin. She refused to fail. A sudden gust of wind rocked the aircraft, and Emily's stomach lurched violently. For a heartbeat, the plane tilted dangerously. Sparks erupted, metal screeched. Panic clawed at her chest, but instinct overrode fear. She corrected instantly, subtle adjustments, careful throttle nudges, yoke precision. The runway lights streaked closer. She could see the foam, the emergency crews braced. The plane shuddered under her control. She was still alive. The runway approached more quickly now. Sparks flew from the dragging wing, metal groaning. Emily's arms ached, muscles burning, but she refused to let go. She eased back the throttle, controlling speed, anticipating the final deceleration. Inch by inch, meter by meter, she maintained control. The plane shuddered, scraping, but remained upright. Finally, she began to see the end of the runway, the foam lines glowing brighter. The aircraft's momentum slowed. Sparks still flew, but the plane held. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in rhythm with the vibrations of metal on asphalt. Sweat poured down her face, stinging her eyes, burning her skin. Her arms trembled from exertion. She was alive, the plane was alive, but the landing was not yet over. Emily took a deep, steadying breath. One final adjustment. She nudged the yoke, balanced the fuselage, kept momentum under control. The runway stretched beneath her, golden and infinite, every spark a warning, every vibration a lesson. Inch by inch, she guided the plane toward the foam lines, toward safety. The engine roared, wind whistled, and the desert stretched endlessly. And then finally, the plane came to a stop. Sparks continued to hiss, but the fuselage remained upright. The left wing rested on the foam. The plane shuddered one last time. Emily's hands were locked on the yoke, shaking, every nerve alive with exhaustion and relief. She had done it. She had survived the first real landing attempt. Below, emergency crews erupted into action, rushing forward with foam and equipment. Spectators cheered, cameras recorded, phones captured history. Emily's legs shook as she released the yoke, allowing herself a moment to breathe, to process the fact she had survived. The plane had fought her, but she had conquered it. Her mind raced ahead. The aircraft had endured the drag, sparks, and uneven weight. But she knew the journey wasn't over. She would have to taxi carefully, assess damage, and prepare for the next steps. Yet in this moment, she allowed herself a brief victory. She had faced fear, gravity, and disaster, and she had survived. Emily Parker, 18-year-old student pilot, had done the impossible. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the final, full landing awaited. And it would demand even more courage, more precision, more instinct than anything she had ever faced. The desert held its breath once more, the runway glinting under fading sunlight. Emily's hands were raw, her heart raced, but she was alive and ready for the next challenge. Emily Parker sat in the cockpit, muscles trembling, heart hammering like a drum in her chest. The plane had stopped, but she could feel the residual vibrations in her arms, the trembling of the fuselage under her fingertips, the faint smoke of sparks that still curled from the scraping left wing. Her palms were raw from gripping the yoke, sweat slicking her gloves, but she refused to relax fully. The landing was far from over. She had survived the first critical phase, but the plane was damaged, fragile, and every movement could tip it toward catastrophe. Below, emergency crews approached cautiously, foam lines ready, tools in hand. Their eyes tracked her every movement, every subtle motion of the plane, anticipating a sudden disaster. Emily could hear nothing but her own breath, shallow, rapid, a rhythm synchronized with the trembling fuselage. Every instinct screamed, "Stay focused, stay alive, keep the plane under control." The sun had dipped lower now, painting the desert in deep orange and crimson streaks that glinted off the fuselage. The runway, once a golden ribbon in the afternoon light, now appeared a river of fire under the descending sun. Sparks still hissed from the dragging left wing, curling upward in tiny, brilliant arcs. Emily felt a flicker of panic, but she pushed it down, grounding herself in everything she had learned. Her radio crackled. "Emily, you're stable. Fire crews are in position. Take your time and taxi carefully. We've got your back." She nodded, though they could not see her. Taxiing the plane would be just as dangerous as the landing. One misjudged adjustment, one uneven nudge, and the damaged fuselage could collapse. She exhaled slowly, measured, trying to center herself. The plane had survived the first impact. Now every movement would be deliberate, precise, cautious. Emily released the yoke slightly and engaged the throttle in tiny increments, guiding the plane forward. Sparks flared from the damaged wing with each millimeter of motion. The vibrations under her hands were relentless, a warning that the aircraft was fragile, unpredictable. She reminded herself, small adjustments, steady hands, focused mind. You can do this. You have to do this. Below, the firefighters moved in sync with her progress, foam and equipment at the ready. Emily could see their intense concentration, their poised readiness. She knew she was their responsibility, that one wrong move could turn their preparation into a nightmare. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her, yet it sharpened her focus. Every nerve, every fiber of her body was alive with the urgency of survival. The desert seemed to close in around her. Shadows stretched across the runway, turning the asphalt into alternating streaks of dark and light. The plane lurched slightly with each vibration, the left wing dragging sparks across the ground. Emily corrected instantly, small micro-adjustments, yoke precision, throttle finesse. Every second was a battle, every inch a triumph. She had to maintain control. She had no choice. Her mind flickered to the emergency drills, the countless hours of simulation, the advice from her instructor. Anticipate, adjust, respect the aircraft, respect the physics, trust your instincts. She could feel it now, instincts overriding fear. She was aware of everything, the drag, the tilt, the vibrations, the wind, but fear did not control her. Instinct and training did. The runway stretched ahead, infinite, golden in the dimming sunlight. Sparks flew continuously, each one a fiery warning. Emily adjusted the throttle with delicate precision, keeping momentum under control, guiding the plane inch by inch toward the foam lines. She could feel the fuselage resisting, metal protesting each movement, but she refused to surrender. The aircraft's balance wavered slightly as a gust of wind hit from the right. Emily's stomach lurched violently. Sparks hissed, metal screeched, the plane shuddered. She corrected instantly, yoke micro-adjustments, slight throttle changes, subtle shifts in weight distribution. The runway stretched closer, foam glinting in the fading light, firefighters braced, medics ready. She could see the end of the runway approaching. Survival was within reach, but not guaranteed. Emily's arms burned from exertion, muscles trembling, palms raw and slick with sweat. Her mind was hyper-focused, calculating speed, drag, tilt, friction, distance, wind, and momentum all at once. Every second stretched, every inch elongated, every spark screamed at her. You must survive this. The plane lurched again, the left wing dragging heavily. Sparks erupted, curling upward like tiny fiery dancers. Emily held her breath, adjusted, nudged throttle, guided the fuselage. Inch by inch, the plane inched closer to the foam safety lines. She could hear the distant radio chatter, but it felt muted, irrelevant. Only the plane, her hands, her instincts, and the runway existed. A sudden, violent gust rocked the aircraft. Emily's stomach dropped. Sparks flew wildly from the dragging wing. Panic threatened to claw through the thin veneer of control she maintained, but she forced it down, grounding herself, channeling fear into focus. You are the pilot. You are in control. You will survive. The runway lights glimmered brighter. The foam lines approached, each meter a lifeline. Emily eased the throttle carefully, slowing the plane while maintaining balance. Sparks hissed, metal groaned, but the aircraft responded to her commands. She felt a surge of triumph and terror simultaneously. Victory was within reach, but the plane was still vulnerable. One misstep, one nudge too hard, one unexpected tremor, and disaster could still strike. Below, the firefighters moved closer, foam extended, ready to intercept if the aircraft faltered. Spectators leaned forward, gripping fences, phones held tight, silent prayers on their lips. Emily did not look at them. She could not. Her world was the cockpit, the yoke, the vibration of metal under her hands. The plane's momentum slowed. Sparks still flew, but she maintained balance. Inch by inch, meter by meter, the fuselage moved forward. Emily adjusted throttle, nudged the yoke, kept the wing from collapsing. She could feel every vibration, every shift, every whisper of the wind. Her arms trembled violently, muscles screaming, yet she persisted. Focus was survival. Survival was life. Finally, the aircraft rolled completely onto the foam, sparking metal slowly coming to a halt. Emily exhaled in a shuddering, trembling breath. She had done it. The plane had survived. She had survived. Emergency crews surged forward, rushing with foam and equipment, but she no longer needed intervention. The landing, the drag, the impossible maneuver was complete. Her legs shook as she released the yoke. Sweat poured down her face, blinding her momentarily. She allowed herself a brief victory, the sheer exhilaration of having survived an ordeal few could imagine. The plane had fought her, tested her, but she had won. Radio voices erupted in relief, cheers and congratulations mixing with tense instructions. Emily nodded, blinking rapidly, processing the reality. She had survived the landing. But she knew deep down that the ordeal was not yet over. The plane was damaged. The runway, the emergency crews, the desert, all still held potential peril. One more moment of inattention could undo all she had accomplished. Yet in this moment, exhaustion and triumph mingled. Emily Parker, 18 years old, student pilot, alone in the sky, had survived one of the most dangerous landings imaginable. She had faced fear, chaos, and physics itself, and emerged alive. Her mind, however, refused to rest. She knew she had to taxi carefully to assess damage, to follow every protocol precisely. The final moments of the ordeal awaited, demanding more concentration, more control, more courage. And Emily, trembling but determined, was ready to face them. The desert stretched beyond, holding its breath. The runway glimmered under the fading sun. Sparks hissed from metal that had survived. And somewhere deep inside, Emily Parker realized something vital. She had survived the impossible. And she would do it again if she had to. Emily Parker's hands were raw, sweat slicking her gloves, arms trembling from the relentless tension of controlling the crippled aircraft. The Cessna had survived the initial landing, but the ordeal was far from over. The plane's left wing still dragged lightly along the foam, metal groaning, sparks dancing like fireflies against the asphalt. Every vibration beneath her hands was a reminder that the aircraft was fragile, unpredictable, and one wrong move could send everything into chaos. She exhaled shakily, forcing herself to stay calm. One step at a time, she told herself. Taxi slowly. Assess. Survive. Her mind replayed every instruction from emergency training, every lesson from Mr. Carter, every scenario drilled countless times in the simulator. This was no simulation. This was life and death. The desert around the airfield stretched in waves of heat shimmer, shadows lengthening with the setting sun. Below, fire crews and medics moved cautiously, foam extended, tools in hand, eyes locked on the aircraft. Spectators behind the fences leaned forward, phones raised, silent prayers echoing in the tense evening air. Every heartbeat seemed magnified, every breath elongated. Emily could hear the faint hiss of sparks from the dragging wing, the subtle groan of metal protesting every millimeter of movement. She eased the throttle forward carefully, micro-adjustments guiding the plane inch by inch along the foam line. The vibrations under her hands were relentless. Her arms burned. Every nerve screamed. Yet her mind was razor-sharp, calculating speed, angle, drag, balance, wind, and momentum in real time. One misstep could twist the fuselage, snap the left wing, or send the plane rolling uncontrollably. "Emily, you're doing great," the tower radioed, steady but tense. "Keep it slow, steady, and controlled. We're ready to assist if needed." She nodded, though they could not see her. Every movement mattered. Each adjustment was life or death. Sparks hissed beneath the left wing as the metal scraped along the foam. Emily corrected, small movements of the yoke, tiny throttle adjustments, inch by inch, meter by meter, guiding the plane toward safety. Her entire body was a conduit of control, adrenaline, and instinct. A gust of wind hit from the right and the plane lurched violently. Emily's stomach dropped. Sparks flew higher, curling like fiery serpents. The fuselage groaned, resisting her corrections. Panic clawed at the edges of her mind, but she forced it down. Fear was her teacher, but she would not allow it to control her. Focus, precision, control. The runway stretched ahead, glowing under the fatting sunlight. Foam lines glimmered, fire crews poised, medics ready. Every inch forward was a test, every vibration a challenge. Emily nudged the throttle, adjusted the yoke, balanced the fuselage. Sparks erupted again, but the plane obeyed her commands. She exhaled slowly, though her chest ached, her arms trembled, and sweat stung her eyes. Below, the fire crews moved in synchrony, anticipating every possible failure, ready to intervene. Emily could see them, tense and alert, tools poised. The plane responded to her control, but she knew it could betray her at any moment. One sudden tremor, one misjudged movement, one overlooked variable, and disaster could strike. She tightened her grip, forcing herself to become one with the aircraft. Her mind flickered briefly to the emergency drills, the countless hours of simulation, the advice of her instructor. Anticipate, adjust, respect the aircraft, trust your instincts. Every lesson came alive now. She could feel instinct taking over, fear tempered by focus. The plane and she were synchronized, two forces battling gravity, momentum, and the fragile metal frame. A sudden jolt rocked the fuselage. Sparks shot upward from the left wing. Emily's stomach lurched violently. She adjusted instinctively, nudging the yoke, easing the throttle, micro-corrections keeping the aircraft level. The runway stretched ahead, a finite lifeline, foam glinting, fire crews braced. The plane shuddered violently but remained upright. The vibrations beneath her fingers were relentless, each one a reminder of the aircraft's fragility. Emily focused on every subtle cue, the vibration pattern, the tilt, the drag, the wind. She adjusted, corrected, maintained control. Sweat poured down her face, stinging her eyes. Her arms trembled violently, muscles burning. Every fiber of her being was engaged in the fight to survive. The runway narrowed closer, the foam line glowing like a lifeline. Sparks hissed, metal groaned, but the plane inched forward under her precise control. Emily's mind was a machine of calculation, anticipation, and reflex. She could feel the plane straining, each vibration threatening catastrophe, yet she refused to falter. One step at a time, 1 inch at a time, inching toward safety. A violent gust from the left struck, tipping the plane slightly. Sparks flew higher, metal screeching. Her stomach dropped, panic clawed at her chest, but instinct and training overrode fear. She nudged the yoke, adjusted throttle, corrected balance. The plane shuddered but obeyed. Inch by inch, meter by meter, she guided it along the foam line. Below, the firefighters moved in tandem with the aircraft, anticipating failure, ready to intervene. Spectators leaned forward, phones capturing history. Emily ignored them. Her world was the cockpit, the yoke, the vibration beneath her hands. Every nerve was alive. Every muscle screamed. Every breath counted. Survival depended on focus, control, and courage. The aircraft's forward motion slowed. Sparks hissed, but the fuselage remained upright. Emily exhaled shakily, muscles trembling, palms raw. She had survived the most dangerous phase of the landing, taxiing a damaged aircraft under extreme stress. But she knew the ordeal was not yet over. She had to stop completely, ensure the plane was secure, and assess damage. One misjudged movement could undo all she had achieved. The runway stretched behind her, desert beyond it holding its breath. Foam glimmered in the fading sunlight. Emergency crews braced, ready. Sparks hissed, but the aircraft obeyed Emily's control. Inch by inch, she guided it forward, aware of every vibration, every groan, every subtle shift in weight. Her arms burned, her chest heaved, sweat stung her eyes, yet she persisted. Finally, she brought the aircraft to a complete stop. Sparks hissed and smoke curled from the dragging left wing, but the fuselage remained upright. Emily's hands trembled violently as she released the yoke. Her chest heaved. She had survived, truly survived, the impossible landing and taxing taxi of a damaged aircraft. Emergency crews rushed forward, foam and equipment at the ready, but the danger had passed. Spectators erupted into cheers. Phones recorded history. Emily's legs shook as she climbed out of the cockpit, taking her first unsteady steps on solid ground. Every nerve was alive with exhaustion and relief. She had done it. She had survived. Yet deep inside, she knew something vital. The plane had been tested, but so had she. The fear, the chaos, the fragile metal, the desert wind, they had challenged her in ways no simulation could. She had faced the impossible and lived. Emily Parker, 18-year-old student pilot, had survived one of the most dangerous flights imaginable. Her training, her instincts, her courage had carried her through. And though the plane still bore the scars of battle, and the runway the marks of sparks and metal, Emily understood something profound. Survival required more than skill. It demanded composure, courage, and a refusal to surrender. The desert stretched endlessly around the airfield. The sun dipped behind distant mountains, shadows long and sharp. Emily Parker, exhausted, exhilarated, alive, realized that the true test had not only been of metal and machinery, but of human will. She had endured. She had survived. And in the silence that followed, she could feel a quiet, unshakable sense of triumph and resolve. Emily Parker climbed out of the cockpit, legs trembling, hands slick with sweat, her body shaking from the relentless tension of the ordeal. The desert air felt impossibly heavy, the heat of the day lingering despite the setting sun. She had survived, truly survived, but adrenaline still coursed through her veins, making every movement feel both painfully slow and impossibly sharp. Her eyes were wide, scanning the runway, the plane, the emergency crews who approached cautiously, foam extended, tools at the ready. "Emily, are you okay?" shouted a firefighter as he neared her, voice tense but relieved. She nodded, barely able to speak, her throat dry, voice raw. I'm fine." They guided her away from the plane, supporting her weak legs, careful to avoid the still smoking, dragging left wing. Sparks hissed faintly, smoke curling from the scraped metal. She glanced back at the Cessna. The fuselage, once sleek and unbroken, now bore the marks of her struggle: scorched metal, deep scratches, bent panels, a dragging wing that had threatened to betray her at every turn. She felt a surge of emotion, fear, relief, exhaustion, and a strange pride. She had survived the impossible. Spectators cheered, phones capturing the moment. Parents held their children close, some clapping, others whispering prayers of gratitude. Emergency crews exhaled collectively, their tension finally breaking into smiles and murmurs of relief. Cameras recorded, and Emily knew that this moment, the landing, the crisis, her survival, would soon be shared far beyond this airfield. One of the tower controllers approached, radio in hand. "Emily, you did it. That was incredible. I've never seen someone so calm, so precise under pressure." Her lips quivered in a small smile, though exhaustion made it tremble. "Thank you, just glad it's over." Even as relief washed over her, a pang of realization hit her. The ordeal was far from over. The plane was damaged. The left wing, mangled and dragging, needed careful inspection. Mechanics would have to assess the fuselage, the engine, the landing gear. Any mistake in the next steps could undo everything she had survived. The awareness of lingering danger kept her alert, her instincts still razor-sharp despite fatigue. The firefighters guided her to a safe distance. They had already extinguished the remaining sparks, foam sprayed to stabilize the area. Emily could feel the hum of their relief, the adrenaline dissipating but leaving a residue of exhaustion that threatened to collapse her. She leaned slightly on one firefighter, grateful for their steadiness, grateful for human hands to steady her after hours of solitary tension in the cockpit. The pilot lounge, once a place of calm before flight, now felt surreal. Phones rang incessantly, emergency radios buzzed, and news crews began arriving. Someone approached, camera rolling, asking her to recount what had happened. Emily's throat tightened. The words felt inadequate. How could she explain the terror, the split-second calculations, the fear clawing at her chest every time sparks flew from the wing? Words felt meaningless compared to the raw, visceral experience. Yet the story needed telling, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the moment itself, the danger, the skill, the human endurance it had demanded. Emily took a deep breath, the room spinning slightly from exhaustion, and began to recount her ordeal in measured tones. She described the takeoff, the failure of the landing gear, the test passes, the first touch of asphalt, the dragging wing, and the delicate taxi to safety. Each sentence felt like a thread holding the story together, a testament to her focus, training, and survival instinct. As she spoke, she noticed the reactions around her: awe, disbelief, admiration. She saw parents clenching hands, some teary-eyed as though witnessing a miracle. Emergency responders nodded, recognizing the skill and bravery required. Mechanics whispered to each other, analyzing her account for procedural brilliance and quick thinking. Cameras captured her every gesture, her exhaustion, her courage. Emily realized that her ordeal had transcended personal survival. It had become a story of human resilience. Her father arrived moments later, his face pale, eyes wide with concern and relief. He embraced her tightly, words catching in his throat. "Emily, you did it. You actually did it." Tears pricked her eyes. Relief, pride, and exhaustion collided in a single wave. I made it," she whispered. He held her a little longer, then stepped back, eyes scanning the runway, the damaged aircraft. "You handled everything perfectly, better than anyone could have imagined. I'm so proud." Even amidst praise, Emily's mind remained partly on the plane, the runway, the desert. She knew the danger was still present. The aircraft had survived, but it bore scars from a near-catastrophic failure. Every jolt, every spark, every scrape had left its mark. Yet, despite the physical and emotional toll, Emily's mind felt sharpened by the experience. Fear had pushed her, but focus had carried her. The news crews approached again, asking for a statement. Emily took a deep breath, voice still shaking from exertion but firm. I just did what I had to do. I focused on the plane, on the controls, and I survived. That's all I can say. Everyone below, the emergency crews, they were incredible. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible." Her statement captured both humility and courage. The audience, watching live or recording later, would feel the intensity, the danger, and the human determination it had demanded. The story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had witnessed it, everyone who would hear about it, everyone who would imagine themselves in her shoes. Hours later, as the plane was carefully towed to a secure hangar, Emily remained close, watching mechanics inspect the left wing, the fuselage, the engine. Each assessment revealed the toll of sparks, friction, and uneven stress. Yet nothing catastrophic had occurred. The plane, battered but intact, mirrored her own ordeal, tested, strained, but surviving. Emily finally allowed herself to exhale fully. Her knees buckled slightly as she leaned against the hangar wall, exhaustion washing over her in waves. The adrenaline drained, leaving her muscles trembling, but her mind buzzed with the memory of every decision, every adjustment, every moment of terror and triumph. She had faced the abyss and survived it. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet sense of awe settled over her. Not at the cameras, the cheers, or the media attention, but at herself. 18 years old, student pilot, facing a mechanical disaster alone and emerging alive. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. Precision was not just about skill, but about trust, in training, in instincts, in oneself. The crowd outside began to disperse as darkness fell. Emily's father held her hand, silent now, both absorbing the weight of the ordeal and the relief of her survival. Emergency crews packed up, satisfied that their protocols had worked, that a potential disaster had been averted. Mechanics continued their inspection, noting damages, planning repairs. And Emily, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion, pride, fear, and exhilaration. She had survived. Yet she knew one truth that would stay with her forever. The sky demanded respect, fear was a teacher, and survival depended not on luck, but on focus, courage, and an unyielding refusal to surrender. The desert outside lay quiet now, the runway empty, the sun set beyond distant mountains. Emily Parker, 18-year-old student pilot, had survived a mechanical disaster, tested her limits, and emerged triumphant. But the memory, the intensity, the lessons, and the scars, both emotional and physical, would remain with her forever. And somewhere beneath the fatting desert sky, she knew that this was only the beginning of a life defined by courage, resilience, and the unshakable knowledge that even in the face of impossible odds, survival was possible. The desert air was cool now, the sun fully set, leaving streaks of deep purple and orange across the horizon. The runway lights glowed softly, reflecting off the scars on the Cessna and on Emily Parker herself. She stood a few feet away from the aircraft, exhausted, trembling, yet illuminated by an indescribable aura of triumph. The ordeal was over. She had survived the impossible landing, the dragging wing, and the taxing, nerve-shredding moments of emergency maneuvering. News crews swarmed the airfield, cameras rolling, microphones thrust forward. "Emily, can you tell us what went through your mind during the landing?" one reporter asked. Emily's voice was steady despite fatigue. I focused on one thing, the plane. Every adjustment, every calculation, every breath, I had to survive. It was just focus and training, nothing more. Her words resonated far beyond the tarmac. Audiences around the country would later watch the footage, gripping their seats, hearts pounding, imagining the sparks, the groaning metal, the near catastrophe. Yet Emily's calm voice, her humility, her focus, conveyed that heroism was not about bravado. It was about composure under unimaginable pressure. Her father, standing beside her, couldn't stop smiling, though his eyes were still wet with relief. "You were incredible," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I've never been prouder." Emily smiled weakly, exhaustion and pride colliding. "I just did what I had to." The emergency crews were busy securing the damaged plane, discussing repairs, and debriefing the incident. Sparks still lingered faintly on the left wing from the landing, a reminder of the plane's near betrayal and her extraordinary control. Every mark on the fuselage told the story of precision, instinct, and courage. It was a narrative written in metal and smoke, one that would be remembered by everyone present. Hours later, the airport held a small ceremony. Pilots, instructors, emergency responders, and spectators gathered to acknowledge what had happened. Emily stood at the center, quiet, hands folded, her body still trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. The airport director stepped forward, voice strong, echoing across the desert air. "Today," he said, "we witnessed something extraordinary. Emily Parker, 18-year-old student pilot, faced a mechanical failure that could have ended in disaster. Yet through focus, skill, and courage, she brought the plane and herself safely to the ground. Emily, you are an inspiration to all of us." Applause erupted, echoing across the runway, bouncing off the desert mountains. Emily blinked back tears, overwhelmed by emotion. She had trained for hours, drilled for emergencies, but nothing could prepare her for the raw intensity of real danger. And yet, here she was, alive, triumphant, recognized not just for survival, but for mastery of fear itself. Her instructors approached, clapping her on the back, their eyes alight with admiration. "Emily, I've never seen anyone handle a landing like that, student or veteran," one said. "Your composure was remarkable." Emily shook her head, still in awe of what had occurred. "I just did what I had to," she repeated, the mantra that had carried her through every second of terror. The airport director handed her a certificate of commendation, an official recognition of her courage and skill. She held it in her hands, feeling the weight of the moment, the significance of surviving and excelling under extreme circumstances. It was not merely a piece of paper. It was proof that she had faced unimaginable odds and prevailed. Media crews lined up again, requesting interviews. Emily agreed to speak, carefully describing the mechanical failure, the landing, the dragging wing, and the precise adjustments she had made. She emphasized the role of training, focus, and quick thinking, giving credit to the instructors, emergency crews, and her father who had guided her from a distance. Her words inspired viewers across the country, particularly young aspiring pilots who saw in her the embodiment of courage and determination. As darkness fell completely, the lights of the runway glimmered against the desert night. Emily's gaze drifted to the damaged Cessna, still resting on foam, scars visible along its fuselage. Every mark told a story: fear, struggle, triumph. She realized the plane was not just a vehicle, it had been a partner in her ordeal, a silent witness to courage under pressure. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, and for a moment no words were needed. They both understood the gravity of what had occurred, the terror, the triumph, the endurance. Emily Parker, student pilot, had proven that even the most daunting obstacles could be faced with composure, skill, and courage. Later, alone, Emily sat on a small bench overlooking the runway. The desert night was quiet now, the stars stretching endlessly above. She reflected on the events of the day, the sudden gear failure, the sparks, the dragging wing, the calculated corrections, the runway that seemed to stretch forever. Every second had been a test, every moment a challenge. And yet she had survived, proving her skill and composure under pressure. She thought about the fear she had felt, how palpable it had been, how it had threatened to consume her. But fear had not won. It had guided her, sharpened her focus, and ultimately it had been conquered by courage and instinct. Emily realized that courage was not the absence of fear, it was action despite fear. The next morning, news outlets across the country featured her story. Social media exploded with clips of her landing, reactions from the crowd, and interviews with emergency crews. Emily Parker became a symbol of courage, a reminder that skill, focus, and calm under pressure could overcome even the most impossible situations. Messages poured in from young pilots, students, and viewers inspired by her heroism. Yet for Emily, the real triumph was personal. It was not the recognition, the applause, or the headlines. It was the knowledge that she had faced an impossible scenario, made life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure, and emerged alive. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that age, inexperience, and fear were not obstacles when met with preparation, focus, and courage. Months later, the Cessna was repaired, restored to flight-ready condition. Emily returned to training, now with the quiet confidence that came from surviving the most extreme test a student pilot could face. She flew again, each takeoff, each maneuver imbued with lessons learned from the day the gear failed, and the plane had become a test of her limits. And though she continued her studies, continued to train, continued to fly, Emily Parker never forgot the desert runway at sunset, the sparks from the dragging wing, the sound of metal scraping asphalt, and the intense focus it had demanded. It was a day that defined her, a story she would carry forever. The memory lingered as a quiet fire inside her, a reminder of courage, resilience, and the indomitable human spirit. Emily Parker had survived the impossible, and in doing so, she had become more than a student pilot. She had become a symbol of determination under pressure, a testament to the power of focus, courage, and unyielding resolve. And beneath the desert stars, as the repaired Cessna rested quietly in the hangar, Emily Parker looked up, a small, triumphant smile on her lips. The sky had tested her, fear had challenged her, but she had endured. And she knew, without doubt, that she would face whatever came next with the same courage, focus, and strength that had carried her through the day she landed a crippled plane and survived. The night was silent, the desert calm, yet the story of Emily Parker, the 18-year-old student pilot who defied disaster, would echo far beyond that runway, inspiring courage and resilience wherever it was told.